use, and it has, it's with an indefinite life, so it has an indefinite life, or it's not in use. So in this case, we need to go one test for impairment. On the other hand, goodwill. If you have a goodwill in your books, then we know that goodwill arises only when there is a business combination. It's because internally generated goodwill can never ever be recognized, and we will also build this understanding in another module when we will talk about intangible assets. But as a accountant, we already know that goodwill is an intangible asset, and goodwill comes into picture when there is an acquisition of business. So it says that if you have goodwill in your books, then go for it, test it. Now moving to the measurement. If an asset carrying value is higher than its realistic value, measured at its recoverable amount, the asset is judged to have suffered an impairment loss. So it means that we need to measure the recoverable amount if we have evaluated that the asset has suffered impairment loss. So the asset should therefore be reduced in value by the amount of impairment loss. So we need to know what is impairment loss and how we calculate it, how we measure it. So impairment loss is equal to the carrying value minus recoverable value. So we've already understood the definition of impairment and impairment loss. Now let's understand the technical definition of carrying amount and recoverable amount. So carrying amount is the amount at which the asset is recognized after deducting any accumulated depreciation or amortization and accumulated impairment losses thereon. So if you see, the carrying amount is the cost, is the cost after deducting depreciation, or in case of tangible asset, or amortization in case of intangible asset, and any accumulated impairment losses. On the other hand, the recoverable amount is the hire of an asset or CGU. Fair value less cost to sale and its value in use. So when we need to calculate the recoverable amount, we need to do two things. One, we need to analyze what is the value of the asset in the market, that is the fair value, less cost of selling, if any. And on the other hand, if the fair value is not possible, or even if we need to calculate and see how much economic benefit we can arrive from the asset, so that is the value in use. We will surely now look at what is the fair value technical definition, and what is cost to sell refers to, and what is value in use. So fair value. Fair value is the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date. I would like to highlight that this definition of fair value is actually derived from IFRS 13, because there is a specific standard IFRS 13 which is fair value measurement, wherein the definition of fair value has been given. If we understand this definition, it says that this is actually the price which would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability. It should be an orderly transaction. So by orderly transaction, which is on arm's length line between the market participants. The market participants, if doing any transaction which is orderly transaction at arm's length price, at the measurement date, whatever the price of it is the fair value. So if there is active market for the asset, the fair value should be based on the market price, or we can say the price of recent transaction in the similar asset. On the other hand, if there is no active market in the asset, it might be possible to estimate the fair value using the best estimate of what market participant might pay in an orderly transaction. So this is the definition of fair value, and we need to see if there is an active market, then it is based on market price. and if there's no active bucket, then we do the best estimate. Now, what is the cost of disposal? It is also, you can say the cost of sale. So, the cost of disposal are the incremental costs directly attributable to the disposal of an asset or cash generating unit, excluding any finance costs and income tax expenses. Because it says that any cost which is directly related to the disposal of assets. So, when you need to dispose of an asset, if you won't incur that expense, the asset won't be able to be disposed of. So, it says that if there is any directly attributable cost related to disposal, that is the cost of disposal. However, it doesn't include any tax expenses. Why? Because you all know, guys, in income tax we have read that if there could be a capital gain on the sale of assets. On that capital gain you need to pay tax. So that is not part of cost of disposal. Or if there is any finance cost. So for example, for making a disposal and certain time disposal cost is too high. If you see the disposal cost in case of maybe the tranches for machineries or maybe any big project disposal, any site restoration, etc. need to be done, then that huge amount is required. And for example, an entity don't have the finance with it, and they get it on a loan or get some finance from the market. So in that particular case, that finance cost is also should not be considered in the cost of disposal, right? Okay. So that's why it says the cost of disposal are the incremental cost which is directly attributable or related to the disposal of an asset or CG. So that's why what are the example of it? Any legal cost, if you have paid any stamp duty or any transaction taxes. I'm saying the transaction taxes, and that's why I've clearly mentioned that income tax expenses when there is a generally on the sale or maybe there is a need to be a capital gain or then you need to pay tax, that need not to be considered. So the cost of removing the asset or any direct incremental cost to bring the asset into the condition for its sale is the example of cost of disposal. Now let's see that what is value in use. So value in use, sometime guys, you may see that it is considered to be the entity value or entity specific value, because it is the present value of the future cash flow which an entity is expecting to derive from an asset or from the CGU. So this is basically the estimates of the cash flow which an entity expecting from an asset, and then they apply the present value on the basis of discounting factor. So whatever the value then comes up, that is called the value in use. Okay. So now we understand and we know very well that how we need to calculate the recoverable amount, and recoverable amount is the higher of the fair value less cost to sale and the value in use. And now once we have the carrying value less recoverable amount, and what if the balance come up is an impairment loss. So how we do the accounting of impairment loss? So an impairment loss should be recognized immediately in profit and loss account because it's your loss. However, let me just help you to recall that in case of property, plant and equipment, we have done that we have two models. One is cost model and another is revaluation model. And we already know that in case of revaluation model, whenever the value of asset increase, we increase that notional value as a revaluation surplus in other comprehensive income. Now, in case of revalued asset, if the impairment is there, the impairment indication is there, so the impairment loss will be treated as revaluation decrease. It means to the extent if you have the revaluation surplus, so first utilize that or reduce that revaluation surplus, and the balance should be charged as profit and loss account. And this revaluation is a surplus we have talked, it could be under IAS 16 property, plant and equipment, and it could be under IAS 38 intangible assets. So the key important point to note down is to the extent revaluation surplus is available, it should be charged to the revaluation surplus. and any excess, then that should be charged to your profit and loss account. Now let's build more understanding on how to deal in case of a cash generating unit, the impairment loss, because in case of cash generating unit, we'll see the value, the recoverable value at the level of the total group of assets, which is under CGU. So, if it is not possible to estimate the recoverable amount of individual assets, then entity should determine the recoverable amount of the CGU to which the assets belong. So, CGU shall be identified consistently from period to period for the same asset or the type of asset unless a change is justified. Because otherwise there will be no consistency in your financial statement from year to year. And that's why IAS 36 has clearly mentioned that in case of cash generating unit, when you are trying to measure the recoverable amount, and since it is not possible at the individual asset level and you are determining at the CGU level, then identify it consistently the same CGU until unless there is a change which is justifiable. Else use the same asset and the type of asset under that cash generating unit. So if there is a cash generating unit, then impairment loss shall be recognized if and only if the recoverable amount of the unit is less than the carrying amount of the unit. And this is the normal the rule we know, that impairment loss comes up when the recoverable amount is less than the carrying value. However, it says that the order should be in this way. First of all, apply that impairment loss to any particular specific asset which has been damaged or destroyed. Then apply to the goodwill, and still if there is an amount which is left as an impairment loss, then apply that to all the assets on pro rata basis, and this is based on the value of those assets. This is very important to note down because many a times this turns up in your examination also, where there is a CGU and the carrying value is there with you and the recoverable amount is mentioned in your question, and it says that evaluate the impairment, and there are indication of impairment, and evaluate it and allocate the impairment loss. So in that particular case, we need to allocate that impairment loss. First, reduce the value of the asset which has completely destroyed, then balance to the goodwill, and the remaining balance of the impairment loss should be allocated to the other assets on pro rata basis. So in allocating this impairment loss, an entity should not reduce the carrying value of an asset below the highest of. So just think about, you cannot reduce the value of an asset, either 0 or maybe minus. So it cannot be minus at all. It can be maximum to 0. Or you can say it should be at the value, which it would have been if then there would be no impairment. So its fair value less cost to sale, or its value in use, or 0. So it says that in allocating an impairment loss, an entity shall not reduce the carrying value of asset below the highest of all these three. Now, after understanding the measurement of impairment loss and how we recognize that in books of account, there could be the reversal of impairment loss and how it could be done. So, if an entity assess, or the entity shall assess at each reporting period whether there is an indication that impairment loss which is recognized in the prior period for an asset may no longer exist or may have been decreased. It means the loss which you have recognized earlier, now you have observed the value of the asset has increased in the market, or maybe the value in use has increased, and that is why the loss which you have earlier booked is not actually a loss. Either it is no longer exist or it may have decreased, and that's the situation of reversal of impairment loss. So how you do the accounting of reversal of impairment loss? Reversal of impairment loss should be recognized immediately as income in profit and loss account. So what you need to do, you need to reverse impairment loss whatever you have taken initially debit to profit and loss account, now you consider the same as income in the profit and loss account. And the carrying value of the asset should be increased to its new recoverable amount. So what will be the accounting entry? So accounting entry will be the asset value will be increased. So asset account debit to impairment loss, and that impairment loss will be credited to your profit and loss account. So this is the accounting entry at the time of reversal of impairment loss, which you need to book in your financial statement. Now I'm coming to a very important note because this is a basic understanding, and the rule for reversal doesn't apply to goodwill. And it says that an impairment loss recognized for goodwill should not be reversed. So just think about why this rule has been given. Because if you are once initially you observe that the goodwill has been reduced, and now when the asset value has increased again, then you cannot reverse the goodwill, because internal generated goodwill can never be recognized in books. Because this could be, if you recognize goodwill in this particular situation again, and you're trying to do the reversal of that, it means you are trying to book the internally generated goodwill, which you cannot, which as an accounting basic rule is not allowed. So the standard International Accounting Standard 36 has also given this very clearly, that the rule of reversal of impairment should not apply to goodwill. So if there is any impairment loss which you have already recognized for goodwill, should not be reversed back. In the standard, there are lots of disclosure requirements, because and that's in every standard. It's just like being accountant, and it's very important to know the disclosure requirements of each and every standard. So every time I try my best to cover the more practical aspects and the conceptual understanding. But in addition to it, I would like to highlight that it's also very important to know the disclosure requirement of each and every standard. So if you see, the very extensive disclosure is given under International Accounting Standard 36. It says that an entity shall disclose the following for each class of assets. So by class of assets, it means that they have one is like property, plant and equipment, one is intangible assets, may have the investment assets, they have, so each class of assets, or within those property, plant and equipment also, they may have different class of assets. So the standard says the entity should disclose the following: the amount of impairment loss which recognized in profit and loss account. So if an asset has been impaired, and after analyzing of those indication or impairment testing, you have observed that that there is impairment loss, that you need to disclose that how much impairment loss you have recognized in your profit and loss account. And it's not only the recognition of the impairment losses. On the other hand, if there is any reversal of impairment loss which you have recognized in profit and loss account, entity should disclose about that also. The amount of impairment losses on revalued asset recognized in OCI. So if the asset was a devalued asset and you have recognized the impairment loss in revalued asset, that means you have utilize the revaluation surplus, that is through OCI, then that should also be disclosed. The amount of reversal of impairment losses on the revalued asset recognized in OCI. So it is like how much impairment loss you have booked recognized in OCI. Similarly, if there is any reversal of impairment loss wherein you have again increase the revaluation surplus, then also you need to disclose the same in other comprehensive income. An entity shall also disclose. So additional disclosure requirements say that there are following for each material impairment loss which is recognized or reversed for an individual asset, including goodwill or a CGU. So if there are the event and the circumstances for recognition and reversal. So what were the events, what were the circumstances which leads to the impairment losses, or maybe the reversal of impairment loss, the amount of impairment loss recognized or reversed, how much the impairment loss you recognize in your financial statement and how much is reversed. Moving to the disclosure requirement from the point of view of an individual asset. So for an individual asset, the nature of asset, and if the entity reports segment information in accordance with IFRS 8, then the reportable segment to which the asset belongs. So in IFRS 8, which is basically segment reporting, so there in under the segment reporting, if an entity is reporting the segment information and the particular asset in the segment has deteriorated or leads to impairment, then for an individual asset that need should be disclosed by the entity. Now how for the CGU? So for this cash generating unit, the disclosure requirement is that you need to give a description of the cash generating unit, such as whether it is a product line or maybe a plant or it's a business operation or geographical area, or it can be a reportable segment under IFRS 8. So the description of CGU, the amount of impairment loss which you recognize for the CGU or any reversal of the impairment loss of CGU. Also, if the aggregation of the asset for identifying the CGU has changed since the previous estimate of CGU recoverable amount, then a description of the current and the former way of aggregating assets and the reason for changing the way of CGU is identified. So, it says that if you have changed, the basis of aggregation, because CGU we already know is a group of assets or maybe the associated liability with it. So it says that the aggregation basis has been changed since the previous CGU or the current CGU. So then you need to disclose the reason for changing it, or what is the difference of aggregation of those assets. So this is all about impairment of assets, wherein it's very important to understand not only the basic funda of impairment, which is then whenever you have your recoverable amount which is less than the carrying value, then you need to book the impairment loss. But in addition to it, a concept of CGU which is attached to the International Accounting Standard 36, which is impairment of assets. So this was all about International Accounting Standard 36.